Imagine standing in a forgotten graveyard, where 7 stones rise like silent sentinels, each etched with the same cursed name, Murphy. Every son, cut down precisely at 21. Their lives snuffed out as if by an unseen hand of judgment. Was it divine wrath for hidden sins? Or something far darker, buried in the earth's black veins? Tonight, we unearth the terror that still whispers through the hills. In the shadowed valleys of western Pennsylvania, where the Appalachian Mountains claw at the sky like the fingers of a buried giant, lies the remnants of Millfield, a ghost of a town forged in the fires of coal and ambition. Here, in the mid-19th century, the earth itself seemed to bleed black gold, drawing desperate souls from across the ocean. But beneath the promise of prosperity lurked a malignancy, a web of control that twisted human lives into knots of debt and despair. The Murphy family, unwitting pilgrims in this industrial purgatory, would become its most tragic emblem. A lineage where every male heir met oblivion on the threshold of manhood, at exactly 21 years old. Not by accident, not by curse alone, but by a calculated shadow that blended human greed with echoes of biblical reckoning. Sins of the fathers visited upon the sons, as if Exodus itself had been rewritten in ledgers of coal dust and blood. The story begins not with death, but with arrival, a crossing that carried more than bodies. It bore the weight of unspoken pacts and inherited burdens. It was 1846, the year the Great Famine gnawed at Ireland's bones, driving waves of gaunt refugees toward America's promise. Sheamus Murphy stepped off the packet ship in Philadelphia's crowded harbor, the salt air thick with the cries of gulls and the clamor of dockworkers. At 28, he was no wide-eyed boy. His frame was hardened by years of toil on barren farms. His eyes, deep-set and stormy gray, held the glint of a man who had stared down starvation and lived. Yet, clutched in his calloused hand was no ordinary ticket to freedom. It was a letter, sealed with wax bearing an unfamiliar crest, from a benefactor whose name whispered of old-world shadows. Lord Harlan Fitzgerald, a distant figure tied to Irish estates rumored to dabble in occult dealings and political intrigue. This missive promised not just passage but placement, with the Keystone Coal and Iron Company in Millfield, 40 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. As Sheamus journeyed inland by rattling stagecoach, the landscape shifted from bustling ports to rolling hills scarred by early mining pits, like wounds that refused to heal. The air grew heavy, laced with the sulphurous bite of burning coal, a foretaste of the hellish depths awaiting him. Millfield emerged from the mist like an apparition. Rows of squat, gray-shingled houses huddled under perpetually overcast skies, their uniformity a testament to corporate dominion. Keystone owned it all. The streets paved with slag from their own furnaces, the general store where prices shifted like sand, the schoolhouse where children learned hymns of industry over scripture. Even the church, St. Agnes Catholic, stood on company land, its steeple piercing the haze like a reluctant prayer. Renamed from the idyllic Greenvale, Millfield was a monument to efficiency, where nature's green was stripped away for the black promise below. What set Keystone apart was its insidious settlement program, a veiled covenant disguised as benevolence. Immigrants weren't hired haphazardly. They were selected, plucked from famine-struck villages, revolutionary hotbeds, or debtors' prisons, with criteria buried in confidential dossiers. Families like the Murphys were chosen for their resilience, their bloodlines deemed sturdy enough to endure the mines yet pliable under control. In exchange for housing and steady work, they signed away freedoms. Debts accrued at inflated rates, children pledged to future labor, and silence enforced through a network of informants who reported whispers of dissent. It was a modern Babel, where tongues of Irish Gaelic mixed with German gutturals and English commands, all under the watchful eye of Josiah Bentley, the operations manager whose thin lips curled like a serpent's when he spoke of progress. Sheamus's first day descended into the maw of Shaft 1, where lanterns flickered like dying stars against walls slick with moisture and grime. The air was a choking soup. Damp earth mingled with the acrid tang of gunpowder and sweat-soaked wool. Men's voices echoed in hollow bursts, punctuated by the rhythmic clang of picks against rock, each strike a prayer for survival. Cave-ins were whispered omens, the earth groaning as if protesting the violation of its secrets. But Sheamus's literacy elevated him swiftly. Within weeks, Bentley pulled him from the depths to the accounting office, a dimly lit room atop the company headquarters. Here, amid towering ledgers bound in cracked leather, he tallied not just wages but lives. Notations on workers' vices, drunkenness marked with red ink, union sympathies flagged for review. The room smelled of ink and stale tobacco, the only light filtering through grimy windows that overlooked the town like judgmental eyes. It was in this sanctum of secrets that Sheamus encountered Margaret O'Connell. She entered one autumn afternoon, her raven hair pinned beneath a modest bonnet, carrying mended linens for Bentley's wife. At 22, Margaret was a vision of quiet defiance. Eyes like polished slate, reflecting a depth that spoke of convent education in Ireland, where nuns had taught her Latin psalms and the art of questioning authority. Her family, early recruits to the program, had fled Dublin's unrest, but Margaret carried scars unseen. Whispers of a lost sibling vanished during the crossing, fueling her nocturnal prayers for the souls adrift. Their eyes met over a spilled ledger, and in that instant, a spark ignited. Not just attraction, but recognition of shared wariness, like two exiles spotting land in a storm. Their courtship unfolded in stolen moments. Walks along the fog-shrouded riverbank, where the water murmured secrets over mossy stones, or hushed conversations in the churchyard under moonlight that cast elongated shadows like accusing specters. Margaret confided her dreams, visions of a vast field where shadows pursued her, echoing the biblical pursuit of Cain, marked for his brother's blood. Sheamus shared his own unease, the letter's benefactor, Fitzgerald, whose name evoked tales of pacts with darker forces, perhaps even alchemical pursuits forbidden by the church. Yet love bloomed fiercely, a rebellion against the town's suffocating grip. They married in St. Agnes on a crisp October day in 1846, the air scented with incense and falling leaves. Father McKenna, a portly priest with eyes that darted like a hunted animal, intoned vows emphasizing obedience, not just to God, but to the divine order of Millfield. Over 200 attended, their faces a mosaic of envy and suspicion, for the Murphys' union hinted at upward mobility in a hierarchy rigged like a mine's faulty supports. The honeymoon cottage on Elm Street was a modest haven, whitewashed walls glowing under candlelight, a hearth crackling with pine logs that filled the air with resinous warmth. But privacy was illusory. Neighbors' eyes peered through lace curtains, and company patrols enforced curfews under the guise of safety. Whispers circulated of homes bugged with hidden listeners, walls thin as parchment. Margaret, with her sharp mind, noticed anomalies. Deliveries arriving unrequested, letters opened and resealed. Sheamus, poring over ledgers by lamplight, uncovered patterns. Families vanishing after questioning debts, their plots reassigned as if they never existed. It evoked the Old Testament's plagues, selective judgments upon the defiant. By spring 1847, Margaret's belly swelled with life, a beacon of hope amid gathering clouds. But the pregnancy was a trial, her body racked by nausea that twisted her mornings into agony, the metallic taste of bile lingering like a bad omen. Worse were the nightmares. Standing in a moonlit cemetery, wind howling like lamentations, surrounded by headstones that multiplied like sins unconfessed. Each bore a name, Murphy, and dates that ended at 21, as if the Reaper himself tallied a divine ledger. She awoke gasping, clutching her rosary, murmuring Hail Marys to ward off the chill that seeped into her bones. Dr. Ezra Caldwell, the town's sole physician, attended her. A gaunt man in his 50s, with wire-rimmed spectacles, magnifying eyes haunted by too many autopsies. His office smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs, shelves lined with jars of leeches and tonics. He prescribed laudanum drops, their bitter opium haze dulling the edges, but in his leather-bound journal, hidden beneath floorboards, he noted parallels. Other women in elevated families suffering similar visions, as if the town's sins manifested in the womb. Millfield's undercurrents simmered like methane in the mines. Ethnic divides festered. Irish Catholics, like the Murphys, huddled in their quarter, facing slurs from Protestant Germans who claimed superior plots. Sermons in St. Agnes railed against division, Yet Father McKenna's words carried double edges, praising loyalty to Keystone as akin to fidelity to God. Wages came in scrip, worthless outside town borders, chaining families in perpetual debt. A modern pharaoh's bondage. Union whispers met brutal reprisals. Organizers dragged into the woods under cover of night, their screams echoing like banshees. Stories circulated of escape attempts thwarted. Carriages overturning mysteriously, illnesses striking at borders. As if an invisible barrier, perhaps demonic, guarded the valley. Sheamus, dreaming of independence, saved for a plot beyond town limits, envisioning a farm where his children could run free from the company's yoke. But at the land office, a clerk with oily hair presented addendums, binding future offspring to Keystone, their lives mortgaged before birth. It reeked of Faustian bargains, souls bartered for illusory security. Margaret, sensing the trap, urged caution, her hand on her swelling abdomen as if shielding the innocent from inherited curses. The birth came on a stormy June night, thunder cracking like divine wrath. Margaret labored in their cottage, sweat beading on her brow under flickering oil lamps, the air thick with the scent of boiling water and herbs. Dr. Caldwell's steady voice guided her through the pain, his hands steady despite the tremor in his journal entries later. The child emerges hale, yet I sense a mark upon him, invisible as original sin. Patrick Murphy entered the world with a cry that pierced the rain-lashed windows. His tiny fists clenched as if grasping at fate. Dark-haired like his father, with Margaret's stormy eyes, he was baptized swiftly, holy water tracing a cross on his forehead. A ward against the shadows already gathering. Years unfurled like frayed rope, Patrick growing amid Millfield's grim symphony. The distant rumble of mine carts, the coughs of black-lunged fathers, Sunday masses where psalms mingled with pleas for safety. Sheamus taught him numbers by firelight. Margaret whispered tales of Irish saints battling demons, instilling a faith laced with vigilance. But omens persisted. Patrick's childhood fevers spiking on anniversaries, dreams mirroring his mother's. Cemeteries where ghosts whispered of debts unpaid. The boy proved bright, ascending school ranks, yet company eyes watched, grooming him for the mines. By 1868, Patrick stood tall at 21, a shift supervisor in Shaft 7, the deepest vein where pressure built like unspoken guilt. His birthday dawned under leaden skies, snowflakes swirling like lost souls. The Murphy home buzzed with subdued anticipation. Margaret's kitchen filled with the aroma of soda bread and stew, steam curling in the chill air. But Patrick's face was ashen, eyes distant as he laced his boots, the leather creaking like old bones. "Ma, it's just the cold," he murmured, though his voice cracked like thin ice. Sheamus clasped his shoulder, whispering a Gaelic blessing against evil, the words heavy with foreboding. The descent into the mine was a ritual plunge, lanterns hissing to life in the lamp house, their yellow glow casting elongated shadows on faces etched with resignation. Patrick's crew, 12 hardy souls, mostly kin from Emerald Isle stock, joked to mask the dread, their breaths fogging in the damp chill. Shaft 7 burrowed 400 feet down, walls weeping water that dripped in rhythmic lament, the air thick with coal dust that coated throats like ash from Hell's Forge. Picks rang against seams rich as Judas's silver, but unstable as faith under trial. At 2:17 p.m., the earth rebelled. A methane roar erupted, a blast like the trumpet of Judgment Day, shaking Millfield to its foundations. Windows shattered in staccato bursts, women spilling into streets with aprons clutched to chests, prayers tumbling from lips. Rescue teams, grim-faced volunteers with soot-blackened skin, delved into the smoking maw, lanterns piercing the acrid gloom. Hours later, they emerged with 11 survivors, battered and gasping, bodies hurled like rag dolls but alive. Patrick lay at the epicenter, pristine amid rubble. No scorch, no wound, as if death had claimed him gently, a merciful angel amid chaos. Dr. Caldwell, kneeling in the dim light, felt for a pulse that had fled, his journal later confessing. The boy perished not from flame, but as if his soul was summoned at the appointed hour, a reaping foretold. Survivors, bandaged in the infirmary under flickering gas lamps, recounted the eerie prelude. Patrick halting mid-sentence, withdrawing his pocket watch, its chain glinting like a noose and smiling faintly. "The hour tolls," he whispered, eyes glazing with resignation. Then, oblivion. 3 days hence, amid the wake's mournful keening, pipes wailing like lost spirits, a letter surfaced from Patrick's coat, scripted in his neat hand, dated fortnights prior. It detailed burial rites, a plot under the old oak, psalms of redemption recited at dusk, belongings apportioned to siblings yet unborn, and at the foot, "The blood debt commences. My brothers bear the cross." The words hung like a pall, evoking Christ's atonement, yet twisted into a familial crucifixion. In the aftermath, whispers spread through Millfield's taverns, where ale frothed like the foam of secrets rising. Was it curse or conspiracy? Sheamus, grief carving deeper lines into his face, pored over ledgers by candlelight, uncovering threads. Bentley's signatures on explosive orders, anomalies in gas reports. Margaret, clutching her rosary till beads imprinted her palm, prayed for revelation. Her dreams now haunted by Patrick's spectral form, pointing to the mines as Gehennas of greed. The Murphy tragedy had only begun, a chain of divine-like judgments masking mortal machinations. Each son would follow, their 21st years a countdown to reckoning, the family's prosperity a gilded cage laced with poison. In this tale of industrial sin, where coal barons played God, the true horror lay not in ghosts, but in the living, those who wielded power like a scythe, reaping young lives to bury deeper truths. Yet, through it all, glimmers of redemption flickered. Faith's quiet defiance, love's enduring light against encroaching dark. For in the Bible's words, the wages of sin is death, but the Murphy's story whispers of justice deferred, a haunting legacy that echoes still in Pennsylvania's hollowed hills. In the wake of Patrick's unearthly demise, Millfield hunkered down like a beast licking its wounds, the air perpetually heavy with the residue of coal smoke and unspoken fears. The year 1868 faded into 1869, but the scar on the Murphy family festered, a wound that refused to scab over, seeping with questions that tasted of bile and betrayal. Keystone Coal and Iron's inquiry was a farce, a hurried scribble in official logs declaring Patrick's negligence as the spark. Yet how could one man's error unleash such pinpoint devastation, sparing all but him? The settlement they doled out was meager, coins clinking like Judas's silver, enough to bury the boy but not the doubts. Reports vanished into sealed vaults, locked away like forbidden scriptures, while Dr. Caldwell's private notes grew thicker, his quill scratching warnings of patterns too precise for chance, evoking the biblical plagues that struck with heavenly precision. Grief reshaped the Murphys like a potter's hand on clay, twisting them into forms both brittle and unyielding. Sheamus buried himself in the dim glow of the accounting office, where lamplight flickered over yellowed pages like candle flames at a vigil. The room smelled of musty paper and lingering pipe tobacco, each entry a mantra against madness. Debts tallied, lives quantified, as if numbers could barricade the nightmares that clawed at his sleep. Visions of Patrick's serene corpse haunted him, a body untouched by blast yet emptied of life, as if his soul had been reaped by an angel of death on a schedule etched in stone. Margaret, once a beacon of quiet strength, withered under the weight. Her raven locks threaded with silver like frost on midnight branches, her eyes, once stormy with passion, now veiled in perpetual twilight, gazing inward at abysses of loss. She knelt nightly before a makeshift altar in their bedroom, rosary beads clicking like the ticking of a fatal clock, murmuring prayers to the Virgin for protection against the unseen creditor, who demanded sons as tribute. It was Thomas, the second-born, who bore the brunt of this shadow, his spirit ignited rather than quenched. Born in 1852 under a harvest moon that bathed the cottage in ethereal gold, he had always been the fire to Patrick's earth, reckless, inquisitive, with a tongue sharp as a miner's pick. His features mirrored Margaret's. High cheekbones framing eyes that burned with unquenched curiosity, hair curling wildly like smoke from a forge. But Patrick's death forged him anew. At 16, he transformed from playful youth to avenger, his laughter replaced by a brooding intensity that set him apart in Millfield's Irish enclave. Whispers followed him through the muddy streets, where lampposts cast elongated shadows like accusatory fingers, labeling him trouble for challenging supervisors' edicts, defending mates against docked pay for imagined slights. Thomas's quest began in the hush of the town's modest library, a cramped room above the general store, shelves sagging under tomes dusted with coal grit. By flickering gaslight, he pored over faded mining journals, the pages crackling like dry bones, uncovering discrepancies that chilled his blood. Shaft 7 flagged as a death trap, methane levels spiking like omens ignored. Newspapers from Pittsburgh detailed similar blasts, but none so surgical, none claiming a single soul at the heart while sparing the rest. He tracked down survivors, ghostly figures who had fled Millfield's grip, meeting them in shadowed taverns beyond town lines, where ale loosened tongues. Their tales wove a tapestry of dread. Patrick halting mid-laugh, watch in hand, murmuring of time's end before hell erupted. One grizzled veteran, eyes milky with black lung, whispered of arranged departures. Accidents scripted like passion plays to silence the defiant. Deeper delvings unearthed the damning. Among Sheamus's hidden papers, a missive from Bentley himself. Ink faded but words searing, commanding Patrick's double shift into the gas-veined depths on that fateful birthday. The parchment trembled in Thomas's hands like a leaf in autumn gale, its implications a thunderclap of betrayal. Confronting Sheamus in their kitchen, where the hearth's embers glowed like dying eyes, Thomas thrust the letter forward. The air thickened with tension, the scent of stew curdling into something acrid. Sheamus's face contorted, veins bulging like mine shafts ready to collapse. He snatched the document, flames devouring it in the grate with a hungry crackle. "Some pits are meant to stay sealed, lad," he growled, voice a rumble from the earth's core, eyes flashing with a ferocity foreign to his scholarly soul. "Dig no more or you'll bury us all." The warning hung like smoke, evoking Cain's mark, a curse for probing forbidden knowledge. Undeterred, Thomas ventured into the underbelly, clandestine rendezvous in fog-draped woods where moonlight filtered through skeletal branches, painting the ground in silver judgment. Former Keystone hands, faces etched with hardship's lines, spilled secrets over shared flasks. Union men accident for stirring unrest. Whistleblowers swallowed by the wilderness like Jonah into the whale. Whispers of blood contracts emerged. Pacts inked in the company's founding days, binding select families in eternal servitude. Not mere labor bonds, but sacrificial oaths, demanding the firstborn sons at manhood's dawn. A tithe to ensure prosperity's flow. Biblical echoes resounded. Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, twisted into corporate ritual, where death appeased not God, but greed's idol. These tales painted Keystone as a leviathan, tentacles entwined with regional barons, prophets watered by young blood. As spring 1873 bloomed, Thomas's 21st loomed like a gallows shadow. Paranoia gripped him. He slept with pistol under pillow, its cold steel a talisman against phantoms. Footsteps echoed in empty alleys, eyes glinted from darkened windows. He felt pursued by wraiths, invisible as sin. Margaret found him at dawn vigil, silhouette against the pane, mist swirling outside like souls in purgatory. "They're circling Ma," he murmured, voice cracking like thunder's precursor. "Harvesters for the debt." Her heart clenched. She dismissed it as fancy. Yet her own dreams replayed the cemetery visions, headstones multiplying like multiplied sins, each a Murphy boy claimed by retribution's hand. The eve before, Margaret's prayers ascended in desperation, candles guttering in her shrine, wax pooling like tears of the saints. Incense curled heavenward, a plea for mercy, but heaven's responses often come veiled in thorns. As with Job's trials, testing faith through fire. March 22nd dawned shrouded in fog so dense it swallowed the mountains. Millfield adrift in a gray sea, isolated as Eden after the fall. Thomas, eschewing his mill shift with a feigned cough, ascended St. Michael's bell tower. A Gothic spire piercing the haze, bells silent sentinels of time. He barricaded the ascent with pews dragged like crosses, rifle loaded, cartridges glinting like forbidden fruit. Father O'Malley, frail as parchment, discovered him during matins, the air thick with dust motes dancing in slanted light. Thomas's hollow cheeks and fevered gaze bespoke a soul on the precipice. "Father, the weapons are for the demons at the door," he rasped, words tumbling like confessions. The priest, hands raised in benediction, listened as Thomas unraveled the thread. Patrick's blast no mishap, but orchestrated sacrament, timed to the birthday's toll. A fulfillment of the blood oath forged in Ireland's mists, binding the Murphys to Keystone's altar. Documents hidden, proofs of conspiracy, naming Bentley as high priest of this profane cult. "They'll claim me," then Michael, James, Brendan, each at 21, lambs to slaughter till the ledger balances or the line extinguishes. O'Malley's skepticism cracked under detail's weight, horror dawning like unwelcome light. Echoes of Herod's massacre, innocents slain for power's sake. Thomas's plan. Vigilance from on high, sniper's justice to shatter the chain. At noon, bells pealing like angelic trumpets, he froze, finger pointing streetward. There, 3 in black strangers stalking. O'Malley squinted into the lifting veil, seeing only villagers' mundane march, but Thomas shouldered the rifle, resolve steel hard. The cataclysm. Trigger pulled, but the gun rebelled, exploding inward with unholy force, barrel splintering like divine wrath's bolt. Thomas hurled against stone, life fleeing in an instant, body crumpling. O'Malley collapsed, senses overwhelmed by the metallic tang of blood and gunpowder's acrid bite, the tower echoing with silence profound as the grave. Awakening, the priest beheld a miracle twisted. Thomas knelt in prayer pose, hands folded, face serene as a martyr's icon. No mark of violence, as if angels had rearranged him in repose. The inquiry. Perfunctory, ammunition blamed, though pristine before. The trio of shadows? Vanished like smoke, perhaps apparitions of guilt. O'Malley's journal, secreted away, noted the uncanny. Every clock in Millfield halted at death's stroke, frozen for 21 eternal seconds. A temporal miracle, God's pause for mourning or warning. Shock rippled through the Irish quarter, wakes keening like banshees under thatched roofs. But Sheamus's response ignited like wildfire. No collapse into sorrow, but a blaze of rage. Storming Keystone's headquarters, satchel clutched like a relic, he demanded Bentley. The office, mahogany-paneled, air stale with cigar haze. Clara Hoffman, eavesdropping through oak, heard tempests. Shouts like thunder, crashes of toppled chairs, pleas and accusations mingling in cacophony. Sheamus emerged ashen, satchel gone. Bentley canceled duties, staring at peaks as if seeking absolution from stone gods. Sheamus unraveled thereafter. Ledgers marred with blatant errors, whispers of sabotage. Whiskey's grip turning him belligerent, fists clenched at shadows. Colleagues eyed him warily in the office's gloom, where quills scratched like accusations. Margaret watched helplessly, her prayers now laced with pleas for his soul's redemption. Fearing the debt's tendrils ensnared him deepest, the original sinner in this familial Calvary. 5 years hence, the pattern would repeat, Dr. Caldwell's suspicions blooming into dread. The Murphys' saga deepened, a chronicle of sins unpaid, where each death peeled back layers of conspiracy, revealing Keystone as a beast devouring its own. Spiritual undertones pulsed. Was this divine justice for pacts with darkness, or human evil aping heaven's judgments? In Millfield's valleys, echoes lingered, whispers of redemption through revelation, a light piercing the coal-black veil. In the frost-bitten grip of Millfield's endless winters, where snow blanketed the scarred hills like a shroud over unquiet graves, the Murphy family's unraveling accelerated like a mine-cart hurtling toward collapse. The year 1873 clawed its way into 1874, each day a heavier chain in the legacy of loss that bound them. Sheamus, once the pillar of quiet resolve, now crumbled under the weight of secrets too corrosive to contain. His descent was a spectacle whispered in the taverns, where peat fires crackled like mocking laughter, and the air hung thick with the yeasty tang of ale and despair. Mornings found him stumbling into the accounting office, breath reeking of whiskey's sharp bite, eyes bloodshot as if haunted by visions from the abyss. Ledgers, once pristine testaments to his precision, now bore blatant errors, figures transposed like deliberate confessions, sums inflated as if mocking the company's greed. Colleagues averted gazes in the dimly lit room, where ink pots gleamed under gas lamps like accusatory eyes, murmuring of sabotage born from a soul in torment. Most alarming were Sheamus's public ravings, uttered in the market square where vendors hawked withered produce under leaden skies. He cornered fellow immigrants, his voice a ragged thunder, warning of the price of prosperity. Opportunities that gleamed like fool's gold but extracted a toll in flesh and spirit. His words evoked the biblical parable of the talents, twisted into a cautionary tale. Accept the master's coin, and repay with your firstborn's blood. Faces paled at his approach, children clutched skirts, for Sheamus's frame, once sturdy, now gaunt and trembling, carried the aura of a prophet cursed with forbidden knowledge. Margaret watched this erosion with a heart fracturing like ice on the river's edge, her own composure fraying. Nights, she wandered the cemetery under moonlight that cast elongated shadows like skeletal fingers pointing accusations. The ground crunched underfoot, frozen earth yielding reluctantly, the air crisp with pine resin and the faint decay of autumn leaves buried deep. Not content with mourning Patrick and Thomas, whose headstones stood sentinel, etched with dates that screamed of stolen youth, Margaret scrutinized others. Rows of weathered granite whispered tales. Johann Steiner, 1859, plummeted from a scaffold despite his cat-like balance. Body crumpled amid sawdust and splintered wood, the scent of fresh lumber mingling with blood's coppery flood. Pietro Rossini, 1864, pinned by a mine cart in tunnels where echoes amplified his final gasp, despite his pre-shift inspection under lantern's flickering glow. Edward Flanagan, 1871, drowned in the creek's shallow murmur, waters he had mastered as a boy, now claiming him like a baptism reversed into damnation. At least a dozen such markers dotted the plot, each death an accident rubber-stamped by Keystone's puppets, yet threaded with sinister symmetry. Promotions dangled like forbidden fruit in preceding weeks, settlements lavish as hush money, and remnants, notes, diaries, hinting at foreknowledge like suicides scripted by unseen hands. These patterns chilled Margaret like a draft from hell's antechamber, evoking Old Testament reckonings. The slaughter of Egypt's firstborn, a divine tithe for freedom's price. But here the pharaoh was Keystone, extracting sons to fuel its infernal engines. Her investigations, conducted in stolen hours amid gravestones slick with frost, unearthed spiritual undertones. Families bound in a modern idolatry, worshipping industry's golden calf at altars of coal and iron. It was Michael, the third son, who unearthed the keystone of this nightmare edifice. At 19, he embodied the family's resilient fire. Tall and lean, with Sheamus's stormy gaze and Margaret's unyielding spirit. His hands calloused from mill work yet deft in turning pages. Haunted by brothers' ghosts, he prowled Millfield's underbelly, questioning elders in hushed corners where pipe smoke curled like incense at confession. His quest led to St. Michael's basement, a vaulted crypt beneath the church, air musty with mildew and forgotten tomes, cobwebs draping like veils over secrets. Amid dusty crates, under the weak beam of a smuggled lantern, he pried open a locked chest, would groaning like a sinner's lament, revealing parchments yellowed as ancient scrolls. These contracts, scripted in ornate English laced with Latin legalese, dated to the 1820s, Keystone's genesis amid Pennsylvania's wild frontiers. Signatures sprawled like blood oaths. Representatives of immigrant clans, including Sheamus's father, Eamon Murphy, who had crossed earlier, fleeing Ireland's woes only to forge chains for posterity. The documents outlined a feudal covenant. Land, labor, shelter granted in exchange for eternal fealty. But the core clause pulsed with malevolence. A tithe of blood demanded from each lineage, the eldest male heir surrendered at 21. Death cloaked in accident's guise to evade earthly justice. In return, perpetual security, a twisted Eden where prosperity flowed, but at the cost of generational sacrifice. Biblical echoes resounded. Abraham's blade over Isaac, halted by grace. Here, no angel intervened, only corporate reapers collecting due. Michael's blood ran cold as he deciphered the Latin. Phrases like sanguinis debitum, blood debt. Under the basement's oppressive silence, broken only by distant bell tolls like funereal knells. This was no mere exploitation. It was a profane sacrament, blending legal bondage with spiritual desecration. Families yoked like beasts in Pharaoh's fields. On a December eve in 1873, wind screeching through cottage cracks like wailing spirits, Michael laid the documents on the kitchen table. The hearth's flames danced shadows across the parchments, illuminating clauses that damned. Margaret's eyes widened, hands trembling as she traced Amon's signature, a betrayal from beyond the grave. Sheamus exploded, sweeping papers to the floor with a roar, tearing them like a heretic's Bible, curses in Gaelic invoking hell's fury. "Incinerate them!" he bellowed, face flushed as if fevered by demons, eyes wild with terror's glaze. "Speak not, or join the earth with your kin. This veil protects what remains." Fragments fluttered like ashes from a pyre, but Margaret's resolve crystallized. If bound by ancestral sin, redemption demanded rebellion, a renegotiation with the abyss or martyrdom in the attempt. Winter's fury deepened, blizzards howling like judgments from on high, snow entombing Millfield in white isolation. The Murphy home became a sepulchre of silence. Sheamus brooding by the fire, bottle in hand, guilt etching deeper furrows. Margaret plotting in whispers, rosary beads her anchor. Michael vigilant, pistol concealed, eyes scanning shadows for harbingers. February 14th, 1874, Valentine's, ironic in its love-laced date, dawned crystalline cold, breath-fogging windows like ghostly script. 2 months from Michael's 21st, Margaret acted. Her plan a desperate gambit against fate's inexorable wheel. Studying precedents, she noted isolation's role. Each victim alone at the reap, no eyes to witness the slight. This time, shields would encircle. She sought Father O'Malley, the priest's rectory warmed by a peat blaze, air scented with wax and incense. Confessing suspicions, she produced secreted copies, parchments duplicated in stealth before destruction. O'Malley's face paled under candlelight, hands quivering as he read. His own delving into sacristy archives unveiled unholy alliances. Church erected on keystone coin, priests as notaries to pacts blending cross and contract, blurring salvation with servitude. A hidden ledger, behind false paneling, stones scraping like a tomb unsealed, chronicled spiritual transactions. Families listed, obligations tallied. Murphy's noted for 7 sons as offering, Amon's hand sealing the doom. This revelation shattered O'Malley, evoking Judas's betrayal, 30 pieces for souls. United, they schemed exposure. Rally kin of the fallen, amass proofs irrefutable as scripture, appeal to outsiders beyond Keystone's taint. State marshals, federal eyes, presses hungry for scandal. But Michael rebelled against hiding, his courage a double-edged blade like David's sling. "No cowering in cloisters," he declared, voice steady as forged steel. "Confront the serpents in their den. Demand release from this Gehenna." The clash erupted on a March morn, frost rhyming windows like divine warnings. 2 weeks from his birthday, Margaret pleaded in vain, her embrace fierce as a mother's lament. Michael marched to Keystone's bastion, contract copy clutched like a talisman, boots crunching snow paths lined with skeletal trees. The headquarters loomed, brick facade stern as judgment's throne, interior halls echoing with clerical murmurs. Demanding Bentley and board, he unfurled the parchment amid stunned silence, words booming like prophetic thunder. "Explain my brother's blood. Annul this infernal bond." Chaos ensued. Bentley, composure fracturing like thin ice, babbled in tongues. English fracturing into archaic mutters, eyes flicking to windows as if summoning storms. Officials huddled, led by Ezra Caldwell, the lawyer, kin to the doctor, whispers hissing like vipers. They proffered a settlement. Silence for freedom, wealth to flee. Michael spurned it, vowing escalation to capitals and broadsheets. As he departed, Caldwell's parting shot chilled. Debts eternal. Contracts unbreakable. Your kin learned. So shall you. Twilight fell. Streets dim under gas lamps' hazy glow. Shadows lengthening like accusatory arms. 3 cloaked figures trailed. Phantoms from Thomas's vision. Footsteps muffled on cobbles. But Margaret's web ensnared. Allies shadowed. O'Malley in cassock. Dr. Caldwell with medical bag. Eyes piercing the gloom, thwarting ambush. Dawn broke with revelation. Bentley dead in his sanctum. Slumped over desk amid scattered papers. Face contorted in rictus of dread. Hand gripping a quill-scrawled missive. The contracts must end, trailing into madness. Heart's failure proclaimed, yet whispers hinted poison or fright's fatal grip. A divine stroke, perhaps, like Ananias felled for deceit. Unraveling accelerated. Officials, fearing the reaper's turn, confessed in torrents. System of servitude veiled in fear, deaths engineered with alchemical subtlety. Patrick's gas timed by saboteurs, explosion a controlled inferno sparing all but the marked. No supernatural specters, but mortal machinations aping fate, rooted in industrial avarice. Yet spiritual justice hovered. Sins exposed, redemption glimpsed in truth's light, Murphy's Calvary yielding resurrection through revelation. The family's saga twisted onward, echoes of ancestral guilt fading under scrutiny's glare, but the chill lingered, a reminder that some pacts, though broken, scar the soul eternally. The unraveling was merciless. Once Josiah Bentley's corpse cooled on his mahogany desk, the conspiracy that had murdered with clockwork precision for half a century began to bleed from every seam. Terrified executives, lawyers, and foremen, men who had slept soundly while boys were buried, suddenly discovered religion, conscience, or simple fear of the noose. Confessions poured out like black water from a breached shaft. The methods were laid bare, clinical, and monstrous. Patrick's explosion, a brass capsule of fulminate slipped into the air monitoring equipment, detonated by a clockwork fuse set to the exact minute of his birth. Thomas's rifle, cartridges hand-loaded with an unstable mercury compound that turned the barrel into a pipe bomb the instant the primer kissed powder. Johann Steiner's fall from the scaffold, a single plank sawn 3/4 through, coated with axle grease on the underside so no footprint would show. Every death a masterpiece of misdirection. Accidents so perfect they fooled coroners, priests, and grieving mothers alike. But the deepest cut came from Dr. Ezra Caldwell's journals, 23 leather volumes hidden beneath the floorboards of his surgery. In spidery, guilt-soaked handwriting he named the killers, a traveling cadre of 6 adjusters, who moved from company town to company town like plague doctors in reverse. They carried medical bags, tool kits, and the quiet arrogance of men who believed history belonged to those who wrote the death certificates. Caldwell had been forced to sign the lies, dose the dying with laudanum so their last words would never reach daylight, and live with the screams echoing inside his skull every night thereafter. When the State Commission finally pried open those journals in the summer of 1874, the nation recoiled. Headlines screamed from Pittsburgh to Portland, "The children of the coal barons, sacrificed for dividends." Michael Murphy lived to see his 22nd spring. He stood in the cemetery the morning after his birthday, snow still clinging to the mountains, and placed a single white rose on each of his brothers' graves. No one died that day. For the first time in recorded Murphy blood, a male heir crossed the invisible line and kept breathing. But freedom is rarely gentle to those who tear it from the jaws of power. Retribution came swift and biblical. Their cottage windows were smashed under cover of night, the word traitor painted in coal tar across the door. Sheamus was dismissed with a single curt letter and found every store in Millfield suddenly out of credit for the Murphy name. Anonymous notes slid under doors promised that the debt merely changes collectors. Fires blossomed in the homes of families who dared speak. Father O'Malley's church burned to its foundations on Easter Sunday. The priest dragged from the flames with singed cassock and soot-streaked face, clutching only a satchel of copied contracts. He fled east and never again spoke the name Millfield aloud. Dr. Caldwell lasted only days longer. On the eve of his testimony, he was found slumped across his desk, lips blue from laudanum, a suicide note in handwriting no one who knew him recognized. Pinned beneath the inkwell was a single playing card, the ace of spades, the traditional calling card of the adjusters. By May, Sheamus lay bleeding in a ditch outside town, skull cracked, whispering through swollen lips that they wore the same dark coats. Margaret's mysterious illness, arsenic in the well, the Pittsburgh doctors finally concluded, left her wasting to little more than bone and rosary beads. Even 14-year-old Brendan came home with split lips and the word rat carved into his school.
Primer.
There was only one road left. On a moonless night in July 1874, the remnants of the Murphy family slipped aboard a westbound train with nothing but 2 carpet bags and the clothes on their backs. They left behind the cottage, the furniture, the photographs, and the graves of 2 sons who would never know their brothers had outlived the curse. The journey took 23 days of smoke, cinders, and terror. At every water stop, Sheamus scanned platforms for the glint of dark coats among the crowds. Margaret clutched her rosary until the beads cut crescents into her palms. Michael and Brendan sat back to back, pistols hidden beneath blankets, eyes never closing. They stepped off the train in Portland, Oregon, under a sky so wide and clean it felt like blasphemy. Cedar Falls, 60 miles into the Cascades, smelled of pine sap and wet earth instead of coal smoke. The mills paid honest wages. No one owned the houses, the stores, or the church pews. For the first time in 3 generations, a Murphy man swung an axe without looking over his shoulder for the shadow of debt. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar, took root. Michael married Sarah Donnelly in the Little Cedar Church in 1876. Their children came quickly, 2 daughters with their mother's laugh, and in 1871 a son they named Patrick, because some names must be redeemed, not buried. Brendan grew tall and gentle, became the town schoolmaster, and on his 21st birthday in 1880 the family gathered in silence at dawn, waiting for the sky to fall. Nothing happened. The sun rose.
Beurre sang.
The curse, it seemed, had drowned somewhere in the Mississippi. They should have known better. In the spring of 1885, when young Patrick Murphy, 3rd of that name, turned 16, the dreams began. He woke screaming of headstones marching in endless rows, of a voice like grinding coal whispering, "The ledger is not closed." Against his father's furious prohibitions, the boy began writing letters, to newspapers, to labor organizers, to anyone who would listen. Pieces of the old story drifted west like ash on the wind. By 17 he had a thick folder of clippings, testimonies, and faded photographs of 7 Pennsylvania graves. The watchers returned. Strangers lingered outside the schoolhouse. A mill saw slipped and nearly took Michael's arm. Sarah found rat poison in the sugar bowl. And on quiet nights the family heard footsteps on the roof that stopped only when Michael fired birdshot into the dark. This time they did not run. They prepared. Word spread through the labor camps of the Northwest. The Murphys needed witnesses. On March 15, 1888, 20 years to the day since the first Patrick died in Shaft 7, Cedar Falls Town Square filled with more than 50 men. Loggers with double-bit axes, miners carrying dynamite like bouquets, Pinkerton defectors who had seen too much, even a federal marshal who wanted the truth on record. 3 newspaper reporters stood ready with notebooks and magnesium flashpans. At 2:17 p.m., the exact minute the methane took the first Patrick, 3 men in dark coats stepped from the crowd. They never reached the boy. The square erupted in shouts and the metallic chorus of Winchester levers. Rope appeared as if by magic. Within minutes the adjusters knelt in the mud, faces pale, confessing everything. Names, the names of the remaining board members who still collected dividends stained with children's blood. The ledgers hidden in Philadelphia vaults. The full list of families, Irish, Italian, German, Polish, whose sons had paid the tithe from Massachusetts to Illinois. The trials lasted 2 years. In 1889, a federal judge in Portland struck the original Keystone contracts with a gavel that echoed like a church bell across the nation. The documents were declared void ab initio under duress and fraud. And every surviving family received reparations. Small, symbolic, but real. More importantly, the case birthed the first federal laws banning perpetual labor servitude. laws that would later shield millions during the great strikes of the 1890s and beyond. Michael Murphy lived to see his son Patrick marry, to bounce grandchildren on his knee, to die in his own bed in 1917 at the age of 64, older than any Murphy man had lived in a century. Brendan became a beloved superintendent of schools and passed peacefully in 1932, surrounded by students who never knew they owed their freedom to the blood of his brothers. The 7 graves in Pennsylvania still stand. Weeds and briars have claimed the iron fence, and the name Murphy is nearly worn smooth by 100 winters. But on certain spring mornings, when the mist rises off the hollows and the redbud blooms blood-red against the stones, locals say you can hear the faint sound of chains breaking, metal links snapping one by one, carried away on the wind toward the west. The Murphy sons did not die because of a curse. They died because powerful men weighed their lives against quarterly profits and found them expendable. But in the end, the ledger was balanced. Not with more blood, but with courage so fierce it burned hotter than any coal seam. And somewhere, in the quiet forests of Oregon, the descendants of those 7 murdered boys still walk free beneath a sky unowned by any company, breathing air that belongs to no one but God and themselves. The debt is paid, the chain is broken, and the story, though it cost rivers of tears and decades of terror, finally, mercifully, ends not in a grave at 21, but in the laughter of children who will never know what the number 21 once meant to their bloodline.